Hey guys, welcome to Rooted in Greatness. You guys know that this series we're focusing on athletes and leaders and professionals out of this industry in this space. Why? Because we want to talk about what the roots are, right? How their identity is rooted, how those standards, principles, when they're on the field, how they get rooted, and when they're off the field, how do they get rooted? What kind of principles are they using in practice? How are we infusing faith-based principles in there? And are we using faith-based principles at all? How are we helping them understand their spiritual development? And then how are we growing that? So I'm here today, my guest today. I'm so excited to have her, learn more about her, and you guys to get to know her and how she does her work. Dr. Tess, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So good to have you here. Dr. Tess, would you do me first and a favor and tell everybody who you are, where you're working at, what you do now, and the kind of work that you do in the industry?
Absolutely. So, I am a clinical sports psychologist and certified mental performance consultant based out of Nashville, Tennessee, but I work across the country and really globally through my practice called Unapologetic Psych. And what that means is that I work with athletes, performers, professionals who just want to be unapologetically themselves. So they want to perform or lead or play or just kind of be unapologetically who they are. And because of that, my performance and mental health work are really focused on identity and who people are, maybe outside of the field or outside of the spaces that people see them really publicly. So, really tuning into who you are and understanding that aspect of yourself so you can live a really authentic life in all spaces of your life.
Oh, I love that. First of all, I love the unapologetically because, oh my gosh, that just that gets me excited just in the sense of that most people don't know how to kind of allow themselves to be, right? And most people just see themselves as becoming, right? Not being, but becoming something. And sometimes that can get lost in translation. So I think I want to start the conversation off with just this simple question, which is when you hear rooted in greatness, what does that statement mean to you thinking through your lens of unapologetically being yourself?
Yeah. I think the word rooted really stands out for me in that
Mhm.
when we think of athletes and performers that we work with, like everybody's great. You already have to be great to be there, right? But it's really common for folks to forget their roots in who they are in pursuit of that greatness. And so many athletes and performers are told who they need to be, how they need to perform, how they need to show up throughout their entire lives. And often aren't even asked like who you are, what's important to you, what are your values, what drives you to that greatness. So it can be
Mhm.
really easy to forget. So for me, that rooted concept really focuses on who you are. What are you rooted in? What do you have to fall back on when some of these, really high profile or public things are no longer there? Or there's
Mhm.
challenges you face in that environment, like who do you have to fall back on? So that rooted piece really aligns with me.
Now, with that being said, tell me this. How did you get rooted in this work? Like, because you can't be in this work. We all get into this work for some reason that is in our roots, right? And that makes us bear the fruit of serving other people. How did you get in?
Yeah. I think it's a typical story, like a lot of people in this field is that, I was a high performing athlete. I've been a high performing clinician, right? In all these aspects of my life. But similar to the people that I work with, is I was often told like what I need to be. My identity was often attached to the stats lines or where I
Mhm.
went to school and those kind of things. And so it took me a long time and I think a personal and professional adventure to realize like I didn't fully understand my roots, what rooted me to my
Mhm.
greatness, and that can cause challenges for people to, like, make it to the top, right? And, like, not understand
Mhm.
why you're there, what got you there, why it even matters to you. So for me, it was, like, taking a second to step back and think about, like, what's even important to me outside of this greatness or these pursuits, and it humbled me in a lot of ways of, like, I might have these things on paper, but if I don't understand who I am, how am I gonna help other people understand that about themselves?
That's so interesting because one of the first things that we get when we're born is a birth certificate, right? And it's the stuff that they put on paper about you, right? And so you become known as this birth certificate, right? That certifies your being. And I always tell people that even though that birth certificate certified me, I was 2 months premature and had all these complications when I was born. But those complications, like I grew beyond those. And so I would tell the story about how I was born and didn't recognize that a lot of that kind of moved through life with me, right? It was like the certifying story of my beginning. And I thought that that was the only story, right? That was important. This is where I started. Well, then I read this scripture in the Bible that says, before you were ever in your mother's womb, God knew you. And I was like, wait a minute, pause. That mean that I had an identity that was before my mother knew me? So for me, that made me deep dive and like, okay, God, what was that identity? I want to know that, Rico. Why? I love you said that, people kind of don't know their identity. And I want to ask you, when it comes to like discovering your identity for you, what's that foundational thing for you? What's the before you were ever in your mother's womb that
Mhm.
you started to discover about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I think what's so important about that is our identity doesn't have to be fixed. So
Mm,
many of us, maybe based on geography, where you were born, your parents, what schools you went to, all of these things, we assume that that identity is fixed and that's forever who we are. And we need to get rid of that notion that we can't change as people, that we can't figure out and discover more about ourselves throughout our journeys. So
mhm,
that's the big thing for me is recognizing that there's these assumptions about maybe who I should be based on that birth
mm,
certificate, based on where I was born, who I was born to, where I went to school, where I live, these kind of things. And I
mhm,
challenge people to think outside of that box and challenge the idea of a box whatsoever. You don't have to fit perfectly into any of these boxes that are set out for you. And your spiritual journey, your identity based journey is so freeing in a way that
mhm,
boxes are not, that you get to decide to ask yourself these hard questions. Think about who you are outside of what everyone told you you needed to be.
mhm,
That is the real journey to greatness and self-discovery is that it's not tied to this one thing as an athlete. You're not just thrown in that box as an athlete or as a performer or whatever it might be if you don't explore all these other things about yourself, your values, your beliefs, what's important to you, what you consider to maybe be a higher power. Like in the end, when that box is taken away from you, you no longer get
mhm.
to be an athlete or a performer or a professional. You're sort of left with nothing. And so for me, it's that identity is not fixed and that identity work is just as important as anything else that we do in this kind of mental health and performance space.
I love that. So here's what I want to ask you. With that, with your identity not being fixed, right? And being able to kind of grow, or I'll say expand. In that expansion, I remember speaking with someone who simple experience was that they just missed their family. Family was in another country and they missed their family. And I remember challenging the narrative of missing,
Hmm.
right? And what does that mean? What is the identity that you built around missing them? Because sometimes I feel we grab context and terminology from other people's circumstances and experiences. And so missing for you has become this derogatory thing. The way that I explained it to them was I said to them, my children lived far away from me and I would cry. Every year they would come with me. I'd cry. I'm so sorry you guys live so far away and you don't get time with me. And I told her, I said, my daughter wiped my tears and my son, they were on my lap. They wiped me to say, Daddy, stop crying. And I was like, but daddy's so sorry. And they're like, Daddy, but you got to stop crying. I'm like, why? And they said, because that's not what we think about. We just think about the next time we're going to get to see you. And that was like a revelation for me. I said, where I'm crying about not being there, they're excited about the next time they're going to see me. So they're missing me was exciting for them. I said, wait, so missing somebody can be exciting? But the revelation was the context that they had identified at their little young age missing was it's going to be fun next time.
Mhm.
And so they weren't crying. They were always excited. I was crying.
Yes.
So when I gave that to her, she was like, "Oh my gosh. Like I didn't even know that I could do that. I thought it had to be like painful." So for you, how do you intersect these? spiritual principles, because I do believe there was like a divine principle that came through my children to teach me a lesson. How do you give those kind of principles in the identity training for the athletes that you serve?
Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful metaphor, and to be young, right? To be young and void
Mm,
all these definitions and interpretations that we learn over time, but I think this is so common for high performance people, right? Athletes, performers, professionals, and there is always this deficit focus of like
yeah.
where I need to go, what I haven't done enough of, how I'm not great enough, how I'm not perfect enough, right? And we build
Hmm.
that over time, and then there is no room for celebration or exploration or creativity, which are all of the things that really enrich their lives. And we see this in high performers, even, in the research for Olympians, right?
Hmm.
Post-Olympic depression, even after you medal, right?
After you medal, right?
You medal, you achieve this greatness, like the highest standard of anything in the world, and then people
Hmm.
don't know who they are afterwards, right? And
Right.
so this is what we miss about this work is that the way we think about greatness and perfectionism and achievement in high performance
Hmm.
spaces is sort of empty. It's tied to
Hmm.
one thing that A, very few people achieve, and B,
Right.
for everyone will be taken away from you at some point. And so when we're talking about people's identity and spiritual journeys, it's you have to know yourself outside of that one thing,
Mm,
outside of that sport or their performance or whatever it might be. And if there is nothing that you know about yourself that brings you excitement that is stable over time despite
mhm,
achievement, you will be left feeling sad, crying, feeling empty, all of these things. So I'm
mhm.
not huge on like you just need to think positively or think about the good
Right.
things in your life. I
Mhm,
don't believe in any of that, but I think we do need to think about who we are holistically outside
mhm.
of just that label and that expectation of greatness. Because when greatness is no longer there, and it will not
Right,
be for everyone, what are you rooted in, right? Who are you? What are
right.
your values? Who's important to you? What stays when those things are taken away? Because we don't always control that. We don't
Mm,
control when we always retire from our sport or our professions, when our bodies tell us we can't take this anymore, or our minds. So
mhm.
what do you have to fall back on that is stable for you, that you know yourself at the end of it all?
I love that. You made me think about a phrase and a quote that my mentor, who's no longer here, he said, "Where purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable."
Mm.
So if you don't know the purpose of a thing, you'll abuse anything, right? That's whether it's you, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your children, whether it's a pencil, whether it's your career. When you don't know purpose in anything, you can definitely abuse it. What is abuse? Another word that I feel like we have to destigmatize because it's very, and a lot of people, it's very graphic and gory, which is bad. However, it means abnormal use, to use something out of its purpose, right? And when you start having these words about the dialogue about context of words and what they actually mean, I think you're able to make some discoveries about those things that seem so intimidating for even conversation or have triggers attached to them, that you're actually able to make some really deep discoveries, right? Once you remove whatever the stigma of scare, fear, like you said, deficit that's around it,
Mhm.
and you talk about it, you're like, wait, okay. I mean, it's bad, but it ain't really like there's some room for me to grow, right? I see okay, I can learn something different. For you in the work that you're seeing in the field right now, what are you doing kind of to shift the deficit identity? Because that's what I think is a real big context, even when we all get together, right? When we all get together to talk about some solutions, you can sometimes tell that even to get together, I tell people we're everybody in this field is removing the stigma from around from around mental health. And I'm like, can we stop removing the stigma and can we just start teaching mental wealth? How about that? Let's stop just teaching mental health, which is just the standard where I feel like people go up and they go down, they go up and they go down, but nobody teaches it. We can do that. We can. It's possible. With some consistency, it's possible. How are you moving the conversation along in this industry from deficit to, let's say, prospering?
Yeah, I love that because we cannot talk about mental health without talking about these things. We can put the Band-Aid on the depression or the
Mhm.
anxiety or these things, but if we don't help athletes understand who they are and where they wanna go, like, we haven't done due justice, and so it's interesting you name the term abuse. So I think you're right, we have destigmatized a lot of the mental health conversations, to an extent, but we cannot be afraid to talk about the hard things.
That's
So
right.
when it comes to abuse, a lot of the work that I do, because I'm working with some of the most marginalized athletes navigating their identity, they have experienced abused from
Mhm.
others, from themselves. Sports systems are inherently abusive. We ask people
Mhm.
to perform and compete through pain that sometimes they maybe shouldn't be,
Mhm.
physical and certainly emotional. We ask people to compromise on things that maybe they wouldn't otherwise in other spaces. Sport can inherently be exploitive. Like, we have
Mhm.
to just be honest about the nature of sport and performance environments if we're going to talk about mental health, and if we're going to talk about mental health in a way that really allows people to grow and prosper. So for me, when I'm in those rooms, I'm often the person A is saying the hard things that sometimes people don't want to say, and like sometimes the bad guy, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Great, you're talking about these mental health systems within your institution, and but we're not talking about, well, who's not going to go to that system
Right.
because the people there don't look like them or don't understand
Mhm.
or aren't having these conversations about these more difficult spiritual identity based topics. And
Mhm.
so I think mental health services, the way we've destigmatized them is in a really generalized way. Like, yeah,
Right.
let's talk about, the mental health diagnoses or the
Mhm.
support or the adjustment and those kind of things, but we are not talking about the things that people are really struggling with internally.
Yeah.
The things that when they're pulled out of those environments, and don't have that support, they haven't
Mhm.
learned about themselves. They haven't learned to navigate. And so when we have these conversations, I think with our colleagues is we do have to think a step further of like, who do our
Mhm.
traditional and our westernized mental health services not reach? Who's not coming through our
Right.
doors and why are we not, if we're not building systems about the person that's going to have the hardest time coming to use
Mhm.
these, then we haven't created good systems. So I think it's hard for people to hear all this investment we put into destigmatizing mental health and providing mental health services for athletes, like for someone to come in and say, well, it's not good enough and we haven't reached the
Right.
people that need it most. But if we're not willing to have that conversation, sit in that discomfort, look at the even harder solutions, then again, we're
Mhm.
only reaching this small subset of athletes.
I love that. You took my mind back to when I was working in public education, and we worked around cultural competency and working with the professionals, superintendents, and teachers, principals on culturally relevant pedagogy. And one school I was working with had about 127 different languages in it.
Wow.
And so, the messaging and all the things that were going out, yeah, we're doing a good job of distributing information, but we can't say we're communicating.
Mm,
And having to have that conversation with the leaders in the district, like, that's called distribution. That's not communication.
mhm,
And so even in this space that we're in, I think a lot of people think because we provide a service that communication is happening. And sometimes there's just distribution of the opportunity to be served, but people actually don't know the language,
mhm,
right? They don't know the jargon. They don't know. We say mental performance. You say ruminating thoughts and all these. We like, what? What? Who? Who? Rheumatoid arthritis? What are y'all talking about?
mhm,
And because again, when we present these things, and sometimes, I see it when you say it goes generic, sometimes it's too generic as well, right? That we just say, are you struggling with depression? Are you struggling with these simple things, depression, financial difficulty? But those topics are so kind of broad within themselves. And so sometimes we can pull it down to this generic sense, trying to grab everybody, and you actually still miss the person that's wrestling with this very specific thing. And that's why I believe, like, in this industry there is no such thing as having too many people doing this work. When I hear people say it's oversaturated, I'm like, I don't know if your caseload is, but from what I'm looking at, and yes, do we do a lot of work? Yes, but there's no way possible. Looking at how many college athletes, like 500,000
sure.
college athletes here, that's on record. Let me say it that way, because that's just the ones we collect. That's not people that's moving around or not in college trying to get back in college. And that's not the people who are playing privatized sports and leagues and stuff like that. So there's so many pathways. Where do you see like the future of this work going? And it's crazy because with the NIL, we're in a very new, there's a new conversation talking about mental health. Where do you see this work going now? And this is crazy. I didn't even plan on having this conversation, Dr. Tess, but this is kind of just jumping out with AI.
Wow, okay.
I know. Because when we're talking about identity now, right?
Yeah, let me before I get into the MI or the AI, let me
Uh-huh.
answer your first question of, like, where I think this is going. I think our athletic systems need to stop protecting the systems and start protecting the athletes. And what we see so much is, yes, you may be hiring an embedded provider, hiring a system and things like that. A lot of institutions do that to check a box.
Yeah.
A lot of institutions do that in a way that, you can only see the internal provider because they're very protective. And I think they come from a good place, right? We
Right.
want to
Right.
increase their access to mental health services. We want to have these embedded providers. And I think we need all those things. But if we're not asking the question of, like, who is that system missing? And we're not
Right.
willing to open our perspective a little bit, then we're falling short of the people who need it
That's right.
most. So let's say you hire an embedded provider or five, but they're
Hmm.
all cis white women, right?
Right.
And then who are we not reaching? And if you stop there and you say, well, we've got five providers, so we're doing okay. And you have one athlete who says, I don't have access to a Black provider. I don't have access to a
Right.
provider that looks like me. And you don't have a relationship with an external provider who shares that identity, and you're not willing to use this global community of providers that we have,
Right.
you're falling short. Same thing when, we contract with providers, we contract with these systems, like, we have to just open our perspective a little bit that
Hmm.
we need to stop protecting the system so much and just checking the box. Okay, we've got a provider, or, we don't want to put anything external because we want to protect the system. We need to think about the athletes first. And if the athletes are saying, I need to be able to see someone within this amount of time, or someone who looks like me, and someone who has this specialization we don't have in house, then we find that. And we build those relationships, and we build upon our relationships that we have with all of these providers. Because that's what I'm seeing, I think, the most is that these institutions are like, well, we've got providers, or we have a provider, or we have these services, but then they're not
Yeah.
asking the hard question of, like, well, who's not going to that provider and why?
Right.
So many athletes don't want to go to an internal provider,
Exactly.
real abuses in their system. They fear what will happen if coach sees me or finds out. These things
Hmm.
are real.
Real.
We need to have those hard conversations that it's not the provider's fault. It's not, you know, you're falling short. It's that we need to focus on the athletes before anything else. And if they don't have a pathway to get somewhere, that they need a person who's going to understand their identities and their experiences and what they've been through, and they're not going to spend their time educating someone, then we're falling short on our athletes. So that is what I want to say to, like, where I think we need to go. I think we need to be more creative, think outside of the box, not just check this checklist of NCAA.
Yeah.
This is like, if
Yeah.
the system is not serving its most marginalized athlete, then you're not
Hmm.
doing it justice.
Well, so let's stay there because I think that what you just said is
Avoiding the AI question.
no, 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 no. We'll go there in a minute, but
Yeah.
I really want to stay there because I see that same thing, right? Like from all the different schools that I've met with, colleges that I've gone to, I'm grateful to work with Florida State University Athletics. Dr. Keely Kackleman is amazing. Because one of the things I was able to talk to Dr. K about was to say, hey, I know that most people want to work with athletes and they want to be in the fray of, I was like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
Like I need to have the freedom to so that they can meet outside of that and we can talk. Right? We can talk about what they have, what they need, not them the athlete. I need to talk to them
Mhm.
as the individual, their name. And and she agreed. And so that's the way that they allow me to work with them. But I have been to schools, just like you said, to say, no, we have our people.
Yes.
We have our people. Now, and I've talked to some athletes at those schools that say, we don't want to talk to their people. Their people are going to jeopardize my playing time. Their people going to get me looked at crazy and may affect me and what I got planned for my future. They're going to try to talk me out of leaving, and I don't want to stay. So when you see those scenarios, like you said, I do believe we have to, like you said, we can't say we're trying to protect them and we care about them when the truth of the matter is behind closed doors,
Mhm.
right? In the silos and conversations, no, we got to do whatever we have to do to keep them here.
Yeah.
If that's not what's best for the individual. And so we watch athletes lose themselves, but the institution still stand tall and strong
Yeah.
and benefit. So I love that you shared that. Let me ask you, and we can we won't go to AI yet. We won't go there yet. But just keep it in the back of your head.
Yeah, I will.
Just keep it in the back of your head, Dr. Tess. So let me ask you this. Are you training? I got a question wrote down here that I want to read to you. Are you training your talent harder than you're training their character?
Hmm.
Like when you're working with athletes, do you train them the talent part of them or do you train the character?
That's such a good question. And I want to clarify one piece is that the vast majority of professionals in our field are outstanding. They're doing good work. They're
Yeah,
dedicated to the
absolutely.
the piece that we sometimes fall short is especially in our internal systems, we have this assumption that like if you understand athlete culture and you're good at working with athletes, then you should be doing this work. And there's a piece of that that's true. But this is where we get into the talent versus character piece is that sport world, there's a lot of gatekeeping. It's really protective for good reason. Like we do want people that understand athletes and their culture, but I think that's
Mhm.
the bare minimum. And so if
Right.
we say, okay, we've got these people that do understand athlete mental health and performance and the nuances, then we're good.
Mhm.
That means we're good at serving athletes, but our athletes are not just athletes. And so if we're
Right.
not also looking at, okay, do we have someone in house that, if someone is navigating a spiritual identity concern,
Right.
they can go to that person. They're navigating their
Mhm.
queer identity. They can go to that.
Yep.
These are
Mhm.
the things that we're not understanding. And it doesn't mean you're going to be able to fill all those identities in one setting. This
Right.
needs to be that openness to, okay, if we can't do that in house, that is okay. That doesn't mean we're at fault. This kind of work is not one size fit all. We build those relationships and have those referral networks. So when it comes to am I building talent or am I building character, I think it depends. It depends on the
Right.
provider, right? What they're coming to you for. Depends on all these things, right? But my goal when I'm working with people is to get to the recognition that we can't separate out the two.
I love that.
You can't necessarily you can have talent, right? But you can't maximize your talent if you don't know your
Don't
character and
have
you don't know
character.
who you are. And if your character is, your belief or your value is like, I hear a lot from people like, it's not that I want to win, I want to leave all of it out on the floor. Like that's character,
Mm.
talent. Right? Then I don't know that you can do that without some talent. So it's a
Right.
little bit of both of them. And I think what we're doing too much of is assuming that people are either talented or they have character when almost all of this work should be at the intersection of
Mm.
both.
I love that, Dr. Tess. I think just like you, that we have to you can't say holistic and deal in part. And I don't mean that you can't service part. I
Mhm.
didn't say you can service part, but holistic means wraparound.
Yeah.
There are many parts. So the Bible says we're one body with many members. Like I appreciate that so much because I'll never forget sitting at a table working in a school district and we had wraparound services for students and all of the pieces are at the table. And I'm like, this is what needs to exist for athletics right here. Like it is not just coaches and it is not just the trainers. It's not just one clinical psychologist because there are other elements to them. And when you see how they had to work together to take care of the student, right? The student with an identity, it was so beautiful to me where I was like, yo, we got this all wrong. So I
Yeah.
love hearing you talk about that because it kind of talks about that we can fortify and strengthen our capacity. It takes people like you and I to get together to have these conversations because guess what? Now I know Dr. Tess serves this kind of a client, and if I can't, I got somebody I can reach out to that can provide, can become an answer. So now this student, and I don't even like. I tell every other student athlete, I always say to them, "No, that is not your name.
Yeah.
Please tell me your name. Can we not do that, please?" And they'd be like, "Oh, thank you." And I'm like, "No, thank you." And I was like, "It breaks my heart that you telling me thank you because I won't let you well, I'm a student athlete." No, that's what you do. What's your name? And let's talk about the name. I don't wanna talk about the title. That's a part of who you are, so we'll get there. And just seeing that, a young lady just said to me, uh, she's getting ready to intern with me, but it was such a blessing talking to her because she came on full of almost needing to exhale. She
Hmm.
just finished her career, and she came on and was like, "Oh, finally." I said, "Okay, finally? Finally, what's" I was like, "What's getting ready to happen?" She said, "I can put down this identity."
Hmm.
And exactly what you just said about she said, "Do you know how long I've been running in pain?" And she's like, "I can finally take this off and actually be who I wanna be without feeling like I gotta figure out something I'm gonna have to say that's gonna make me go out here and do what I feel like I'm not even ready to do." And I get to do, and I started crying, like,
Hmm.
because I felt she burst into this meeting just like you and I did today, and that was the first thing that came out of her mouth. But when she did it, I told her, I said, "You're why I'm on this call with you." And I told her, I said, "What you just did," I was like, "I don't even need to explain what I do." I said, "Because you literally came into this meeting and did why I exist." I said, "I just need your help to find other yous."
Yeah.
And she's like, "I know a whole team of them across the country." Dr. Tess, from just the time you've been in this work, how do we help? This is gonna sound crazy. How do we help the systems? And I don't know if it's helping the systems because it might be how do we help the athletes find us?
Okay. Yeah. I love this because what keeps coming to my mind is like us as professionals in this field, we've almost forgotten how to talk to each other.
Right.
We silo so much that like the college people are over there, the private people are over there, the coaches are over here, the consultants are over here in a way that like why are we are so protective of I think our professional identities and our institutions and we forget about what do the athletes need. And
Right.
so for me, it's less about like, okay, I'm a clinical psychologist and a certified mental
Right.
performance consultant. I can do everything. I can do the talent,
Mhm.
character, and all of that. It's like, what does the athlete really need? And why are we
Mhm.
so afraid of each other? Like
Right.
in our jobs, this again, deficit culture. It's like,
Yes.
if we really want to serve our athletes best, it's we are all working together. We all
Yeah.
know names of the people that can be doing these different things. And I think of like I have a patient who they have a spiritual coach and they have a
Mhm.
clinical provider and they have a
Yeah.
mental performance consultant that they use as things, right? Technically, I can do all of those things. I can do some spiritual guidance, I can do some mental performance work and the clinical work, but
Right.
we've decided that like if I can really focus on this trauma work that we're doing and they still have to be an athlete in the midst of doing
Right.
all so now they can get some support around the mental performance and they're on the spiritual journey post trauma of trying to reclaim their relationship to their spirituality. So they have the spiritual guide. Like, why are we so afraid of that?
Say that again, right? Why
Yeah,
are we so
so afraid of each other and afraid of the things that are really going to help our athletes most. And so less of the defensiveness, less of the like
Mm,
protecting our provider titles and our systems and more. And like, I get that. I think there's a need for that. We need to have
yeah.
education around what people do, who's qualified to do what. Sure. But
Mhm.
more importantly, we need to ask the question of like, what does the athlete need? And sometimes recognize that it's not us or it's
It's
not
not right.
us and being okay
Right.
with that. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you as a provider. You can't and
Right.
you shouldn't be the best provider for every athlete.
Think
We
about
need
it,
to work
right?
together. Yeah, build relationships across the aisle, have relationships with others, and like really provide the athletes what they need most versus protecting these systems, gatekeeping, keeping, protecting our titles, protect the athletes.
I love that you said that. I feel like when we get to a place where you're able to strip down, I always say to people, practitioners and clinicians, and when we're in this work and you're doing this work, it's so mature for you to recognize that you're doing the work, but you also have the work done on you. So if you were complete, like I don't know about you, but I have to go to my own sessions right? And those sessions help me to also come into the work that I do because just because people get to come and unpack with me don't mean I don't need to unpack too. I
Mhm.
travel too. That's what I tell people. I I go on trips too. So I have a suitcase sometimes. And when we understand that, then you see um why you and I are necessary. I was talking to um Claude Silver. Shout out to Claude. She works with Vayner. She's a chief heart officer for Vayner Media, which that's why I met with her. I was like, the chief heart officer. Whoa. But what she explained is every system has a heart. And if
Mm,
it doesn't have a heart, that's the problem. And I think that's what we're talking about, right? Like that, let's recognize that these athletes have a heartbeat
mhm.
and we have to really figure out what's the heart of the matter. And you can't say that the heart only has one artery
Sure.
when we know there are four chambers. So if you just try to give the one artery and move the clog in one, you might have three other clogs, right? And so you might need to call somebody because I may not be equipped for that other. So I love that you share that kind of idea. Let's talk about this. This is personal to you. Where in your life, yeah, because we can talk about the athletes, but where in your life,
Unapologetically, right? Let's hear it.
unapologetically, where in your life do you need discipline and motivation?
Gosh, unfortunately, it's kind of been the same my whole life, and so I say this thing that, like, I made it to the ivory tower and the view wasn't that great, and so for me, it was like being at the best institution, like having all the training as a sports psychologist and like being the standard of the field and making it there, right? And I got there and I'm
Mhm.
like,
Why?
yeah, like there's still so much that we're missing. And so for me, I left that and I went
Yeah.
private. The purpose of that was to be able to have more of these conversations where no one could tell me like, "Oh, you shouldn't say that," or
Yeah.
no, or I've been in the systems where they do the things that we're talking about. And again, I think these providers are phenomenal. I think they do the absolute best
Yeah.
they can within systems that are not set up to support mental health.
Mhm.
So it's never on the providers, but I think I've been in those spaces and I've been at the ivory tower and then realized like it's just not that great. Like no
Yeah.
single person in these rooms is like that smart. Like we don't
Right.
get anything done without everybody
We
at the table,
don't.
without seeing every angle, every conversation. And so for me, I think it's that shift. I still need to unlearn a lot of what I've
Mhm.
learned throughout my life and through schooling of like the perfectionism, the need for greatness, right? Those things that we're
Yeah.
talking here, I think, again, they're part of you. They're ingrained in you as an athlete and a performer and a high achiever. And like I continue to need, it's like I'm in these rooms or have these conversations to be like, shut that off. Like,
Yeah.
don't say
Yeah.
that everybody wants to hear. Don't,
Right. Right.
and yeah, and it's hard when you're in rooms with people like you, right? You can say these things, but then after this, we're both gonna be like, who's gonna be mad at the conversation that we just had, right? Like, who is
Yeah.
gonna feel like we personally attacked them? And I never want anyone to ever feel that way. I
Yeah.
value so much of the work that our profession does
Mhm.
because I love it so much. I have to be critical
Yeah.
of the positions I've been in, things that I've done that have not served the athletes, the ways that I have been a gatekeeper, the way that I have like protected the athlete instead of asking the question of like, am I the right person for you? And so for me, it's
Mhm.
continuing to unlearn these same things that we're talking about that I'm just as guilty of throughout my career. So for me, the jump to
Mhm.
private was a piece of it, but being private, like, yeah, you still have to make your income and put your name out there and things like that.
Right.
I always want to do that in a way that's unapologetic and it's not compromising and
Mhm.
it's prioritizing again, like, what do the athletes need most? So I just constantly
Yeah.
need to remind myself of that.
See, I
That's not
love that.
maybe it's just constantly reminding myself that it's not about me and it can't be about me.
Yeah. Yeah, I just said this in another call that I was on today, where I said to them that the work for me has shifted and is shifting towards spiritually for me that my life for me, it doesn't belong to me. Like it is a life of service. But that life of service also comes with responsibility and accountability. Love is patient, but love also corrects, right? Love is understanding, right? But it also is the critique. And so when you understand those, like I tell people, we have to have the flexibility and the pliability to get better. I totally understand what you mean. One of the ways that I challenged myself when I decided to go into this journey was I created this curriculum called Overcoming Blind Spots. And I sent it out to the Kansas City Chiefs right after they won a Super Bowl just to see if there was some interest. I didn't want to work with the team, but I wanted to see if there was interest, if this was credible, what I was doing. And so they got back to me and said, "We want to talk to you. We want to talk to you further." Well, I didn't that sound bad. And yes, Chiefs, if y'all want to work, let's work. But I actually wanted to see if it was credible so I could take it and put it in high school students. Because I think so much of the work that we do, we're always, you can think a leader, 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 high performance, high performance, high performance, high performance. Well, what happens if we start to, instead of just working with people when they're considered elite, what happens if we start to believe in the people who are in middle school, in high school, that are actually growing, evolving, and they're receptive? They want somebody, they're longing for belonging, right? What if we start filling in those gaps for them? What if you start showing up for them? What happens to that elite athlete when they're at that status, right? Now you have different people, and I see your smile like expanding
Yeah.
because that's the purpose why we're doing this work. It's so much deeper than just you winning the Heisman, or it's bigger than I think about when you said that, I thought about immediately AJ Brown, like who said, I won the Super Bowl and I enjoyed it. And 2 days later I was like, now what? What else is at the pinnacle? He was like, I'm already at the top of it all. This is all the years of why I was doing it was to win a Super Bowl.
And
Now,
it's never enough. It's never
right.
enough.
And that's you saying that. See, I could talk to you all day because just you saying that goes to a spiritual term for me, which is lust. That's what lust is. It's never enough. Like I ain't got enough, which sends people on a cycle of being in a place of confusion because I'm always like chasing something and I never have rest.
Yes.
How do you teach your athletes to rest?
Yes. I love this question because I actually think of providers too, and that a lot of the work I'm doing now is kind of training and
Yeah.
mentorship of people in our field. And something that I have tried to change in my mindset of now that I have choice in where I go and in the work I do, like focusing less on where I'm wanted and more on
Mm.
where I'm needed. So there might be people who want someone with those credentials and having worked at those institutions, and that's great, right? But where am I really needed? Who
Mhm.
needs someone that works with people at the margins, who understands that identity is more important than performance or success? Like where
Mhm.
am I maybe more needed? And when I answer that question, it is not always the spaces that I set out to be in. So I find myself working in performance spaces that other people in this field may be like, well, that's not performance, but yes, it is. You're a performer.
Yes, it
That's right.
is.
There's no difference in the type of work I provide to someone who's NIA, NAIA versus D1, right? Like, where am I?
Yeah,
Who
right.
doesn't have access to these things that could benefit every level? So I say that I think to everybody, I think we can all think a little bit more about like, where am I wanted versus where am I needed when we
Mm.
think of, in transfer conversations and like, what job do I take? Those kind of
Mhm.
things. I understand that sometimes we have to make decisions that like are beneficial for our reputation or our CVs or your
Mhm.
resume as an athlete, right? I get that and I will never judge someone for that. I did that. But I
Mhm.
think at some point in our life we have to ask her the question of like, where am I needed the most?
Right.
Character, who I am, my identities, the type of skills that I bring to the table, the type of teammate, the type of provider, the type of like change maker I am, like let's ask
Mhm.
a little bit more of like where am I needed? Where can I make the most of a difference?
Mm.
Sometimes you're gonna go where you're wanted, and that's life, and we get to make those decisions, but we at least need to lend some credence to where I'm needed. What is unique about me? What is
Yeah.
it about me? We've got a bunch of athletes, we've got a bunch of talented people, we've got a bunch of high performers. Everybody holds that. Like, what is
Mhm.
unique about me in the way that when I enter a room, the type of teammate I am, the
Come
type of
on.
character I bring, the type of life experiences that I hold, like what is unique and might be needed in this space that isn't always present. And I think this extends way beyond athletes, right? It's us as providers,
Absolutely. Come
athletes
on.
perform people in their lives in the workplace and relationships, all these things. Like we get to ask ourselves a little bit of like, what's unique about me? What do I bring to this table that those spaces may not be asking about or caring about?
Yeah.
Like what is not on the paper?
I love you're speaking my language so much today because I've done workshops for nurses.
Mm.
Um, I teachers have a really soft place in my heart, obviously, because I worked in education for 20 or so years. And when we talk about performance, mental performance, I tell people all the time, like, I think we haven't gotten to a place where we are yet ready to admit that this is not a sports thing, like at all. Like it's a people, human thing. And so we as parents have to mentally perform you as a child, as a whatever. There's nobody that get off of the cuff of mental performance. We just think we do. I don't know why. Like you said, I don't know why we are afraid to admit we need help, but go
Yeah, and
figure.
it's
We're
when
getting better.
everyone when we think about mental performance, we want to think about the athlete, the
Right.
artist, you want to think about these really high profile things, but we don't realize, like, who needs mental performance is anyone who performs, teachers,
Anybody.
nurses, instructors, anyone, right? And so I think
Anybody.
that it's this, like, need versus want, and it's like, we need mental performance everywhere. We need people who are willing to have those conversations with anyone, not just, like, the sexy thing.
Come on. Listen, I wanna wrap up with this, because I know I wanna be respectful of our time, and our time together can be long. We definitely have to work together. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I always wrap up all my meetings with this one question, and it's a challenging question. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, what's the last thing that broke your heart?
It's such a phenomenal question. Yeah, uniquely, I think it was leaving my former position, leaving kind of the ivory tower and maybe realizing, like, I wasn't as
Mm,
wanted as I maybe thought I was, and I think that
mm,
changed my perspective of, like, the need versus want. I think it was how much you can invest in yourself
yeah,
as provider, as a person in these places and, like, do this good work, and at the end of the day, recognizing, like, you're just a part of the
just
system that really isn't there to serve you and maybe to serve the
yeah,
people you think you're serving. So I think institutions break my heart all the time. And I think the most heartbreaking one was like the last time I left an institution and had this wake up call that like all of these good things that I'm doing or the athletes are doing and the people who are really putting like their bodies and their minds on the line all day, every
mhm,
day are just like small pieces of that little puzzle
yeah.
that I don't want to say they don't care about you. I don't think that's right. But I think
I think is they don't know how to care.
yeah, and the bottom line isn't that.
Mhm,
That's not what serves the interest, and so I think it was that for me. It was, like, being a part of a system that I was really proud of and proud of the role that I got to play, and then upon realizing, like, this isn't the place for me and leaving,
mhm.
realizing, like, the system was never proud of me.
You know, I want to tell you thank you so much because genuinely, when I meet you, just us talking for the first time today, it's so great to meet people who are entrenched in this work through purpose and not performance, because that's when the work becomes deeply impactful and meaningful and transformative. And I tell people when I meet with them, I don't want to have a meeting with you just to have a meeting. But I love having transformational sessions, right? And we get to do that. And tell anybody you can create that in any conversation you have. All you have to do is have two people that want it. And when two people want the transformation, then the conversation, the time, the opportunity, performance will be there. Like it will happen. And so thank you, Dr. Tess. How can people find you? How can people get in touch with you? Where are you at on socials? Tell the people how they can contact you.
Well, thanks for asking, and this has been transformative for me. So if anyone
Mm,
resonates with this conversation, wants out to reach out and maybe learn more, Unapologetic Psych is where you can find me. So my website, my Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Dr. Kilwein or Unapologetic Psych is where you can find me. And I'm always happy to continue the conversation. I think especially the hard ones, right? So if this resonated with you, I would even encourage you if you listened to this and you felt uncomfortable, if you felt
Mhm.
something didn't sit right with you, like I think that's part of growth is recognizing, okay, maybe I'm contributing to a system that doesn't align with my purpose,
Yeah.
or maybe I haven't thought about this angle because I'm so busy protecting the institution or myself. And you want to just be creative and dialogue around how do we do things a little bit more transformatively, a little bit more unapologetically, then I welcome those conversations.
Dr. Tess, thank you so much for being a part of this Rooted in Greatness series that we're doing. Dr. Tess, I might have to have you back. Like,
Then you can ask me about AI in a future.
but Dr. Tess, thank you so much for your time today, and welcome to our Rooted in Greatness family too, by the way. But thank you, Dr. Tess, and it's good to have you.
Absolute pleasure.